So let's talk about Rudolf Steiner.
Yes.
You went to Waldorf schools.
I went to summer Waldorf schools and then started my deep curriculum, I would say deep curriculum of outside of biodynamics and kind of the Waldorf perspective around 24, 25. That's when I first started. That's when I first read The Philosophy of Freedom. And then from there, How to Know Higher Worlds and The Way of the Initiate. And then from there, it just kind of spawned into this whole thing. Yeah.
And so for those that don't know, because I'm sure there are lots, because you don't really find Rudolf Steiner that often until you start going into, either you go to Waldorf schools and then you know who he is.
But even Waldorf schools, they don't teach you
really
cosmology.
No.
They're
His cosmology is really special.
Very special.
And so I came across it the first time in probably 2013, I would say, and I started getting deep into understanding. It was around the same time I got deep into Walter Russell. There are a number.
Whether you're a professional video editor or you literally started yesterday, you can make social first edits in literally seconds.
There are a number of luminaries that came up around that time, sort of the end of the late 19th century, early 20th century. And there was kind of a mini renaissance or enlightenment that was going on then. We had major advances in understanding of physics, major advances in understanding of mathematics even.
Yep.
And I would put Rudolf Steiner right up at the top of that list of luminaries. So what was it about his cosmology, his work, and this whole organization that he basically created along with early on with Madame Blavatsky as well, which was the Theosophy Society.
Right.
So maybe you could explain what that was exactly.
Yeah. So I would say the major inspiration for me with Steiner, outside of other philosophical people or scientists, was he was able to really read, all the ancients' work to a profound level, and it was through a non-linear perspective, because he was activating his clairvoyance and almost inhabiting those souls within him.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been clairvoyant at an early age. It had been documented with his family, and he was able to see like relatives that had transitioned and know about them. There was something special there. We've got so linear in our thinking in terms of science, and science now we know has become a religion of sorts.
Scientism.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And not to be tested, not to be, fought against or questioned or anything like that. And that was the opposite of how Steiner worked. Steiner wanted to prove the science through spirituality and vice versa, which those two should be running together in symmetry.
Exactly.
Right. And you know that very well with your work and all the amazing research that you've been doing and all of the downloads you've been doing from a higher source.
Mm-hmm.
And so that magnetized me towards Steiner initially. Also, his awareness that we don't fully know where we are. There's something to that. Making us have answers to everything, giving us 100% answers to everything always raises my eyebrow. And so I really appreciated that there was a lot of theory involved, and the theory was announced as theory, right? It wasn't announced as a documented empirical truth. That allowed me to trust him. I can trust his wisdom. I can trust his energy. I can trust the frequency that he was offering. And then when you start understanding that this guy wrote 1 million pages of work over his years.
It's incredible. The amount of work he put out. I mean, it's so prolific.
So prolific. He didn't live to 100. He didn't live to 90. He was what we think he was, murdered. I mean, that's a whole thing that would probably down another story, but he didn't live that long in human years, 65. And so the fact that he was able to put that amount of work in and to get into such different angles of perspective, it really was attractive for me. Then I started going down his deeper cosmology and understanding what he said was, we don't live in a dualistic world, we live in the Trinity. And that's when everything kind of came together for me. Understanding this balance between hyper-spiritualism and hyper-materialism was the attraction for me, because it's something that I inherently felt as a child and as an adolescent and getting into my adult years. And I needed a system to kind of place this. And he chose Persian lineage as part of that trilogy, which is interesting because my body and my family goes back to that. And so that was another form of attraction. A lot of my family were Zoroastrian. This is
the oldest religious philosophies in the world.
That's right, where there is a good and evil. And he chose, the demon of materialism, Ahriman, as the antithesis to the Christ, and as the polar opposite of Lucifer, which is the bearer of light. And so Steiner is able to get you into a clear representation of perspective. He starts with super sensible knowledge. You'll hear that in all of his work. What does super sensibility mean? That means through your direct observation, through your perception, through the laws of perception. It's not through some crazy algorithm or something that you can't comprehend. It's finely tuning the super sensibles as a basis for you to get your groundwork in and start building into higher levels of attainment. And I really appreciated that. I really appreciated that. Sometimes we are led through misdirection because we're not trusting super sensible awareness, and we're all over the place. And so that was a stepping stone for me to be able to start working on my own faculties and building my own faculties. So I went through all the exercises of becoming an anthroposophist and training my mind and training my spirit and training my body, and treating my body and my vessel as something that I have to steward. And that was his perspective on biodynamics. And so I always like to talk about biodynamics because biodynamics is probably his most popular endeavor, even more so than Waldorf from the Waldorf Astoria cigarette company. And so biodynamics we now know is healthy food. You ask the average person who has any inkling of what biodynamics is, they go, oh, is that like organic food or anything like that? Biodynamics is essentially you're understanding the soil, you're understanding a closed loop system, meaning you're creating a system where everything is self-contained. You understand the cosmology, meaning you understand the star chart, you understand the waxing and waning of the moon, you understand the seasons, you understand that the real new year is the springtime, not the Gregorian calendar. You know that how crystals work in the soil, how they refract energy and frequency and light and activate certain biotics in the soil. You understand how herbs work. You make preparations. You know that when you make a preparation, you're creating vortexes because that's creating structure and that's mimicking our cosmology. There's so much magic there. I just named 1% of it. That's biodynamics. Now, his point of biodynamics was not to create the best food on earth, the most mineralized food. His endeavor was to create the freedom and free will of man and woman to connect to the earth, to become true stewards. So his concept was, by knowing all this, by taking ownership of all this, by mastering the rituals, you're building the faculty of a human being to build super sensible knowledge. And from there, you have a vessel who's prepared to go into higher levels of attainment and the higher concepts of his occult knowledge or whatever it is. And so that right there is so huge, because I think that's one of the most fundamental missing components of our day today. We are living the opposite, Robert. Children are not tending to a garden. Okay, they're not tending to a biodynamic garden. They're not tending to a garden. They're tending to their TV. They're tending to their materialism, their escapism. They're tending to video games. They're tending to all these different things. It's not even like we're not even going out and getting food anymore at the grocery store. It's being delivered to us. Okay, so we're not engaged in the ecosystem. We're not experiencing. Then we're going into state-sponsored schools, and we have to memorize something and regurgitate it, and then forget about it a few days later. That's not creating free will and desire to want to expand your consciousness and to grow your faculties and learn a trade. Steiner was big. You have to learn a trade and you have to love it. That's a super sensible awareness, right? That's common sense. Super sensible and common sense.
Whoa. We gotta get up now, guys.
SS.
They're synonymous. Okay.
Well, that's because common sense is not so common.
There it is. It's not common anymore. We're not operating with common sense. There's a system that's been basically got its tentacles in our entire structure, our entire consciousness, our entire ecosystem. And we are now generation lost because we lost the last generation, the generation before, the generation before. So we're now in a cycle where these patterns and these loss of faculties are happening. And we're so like, we've been sold a Trojan horse of technology that's going to save everything. It's going to catch up to everything that we're losing. There's no way. If we don't have able children and able bodies and able people growing into positions of power that have faculties of how to, manage a mite attack on your crops and how to harvest food and how to survive in nature. These are all hormetic stuff, right? Like the practice of hormesis. Why do I jump in a cold plunge, right? So I can get a survival activation and my body can handle that stress. So when I'm driving down the 405, someone cuts me off, I'm not going to get out into a raging fight. Because these are things that children need to be learning at an early age, especially while their brains are in theta wave. These are moments that they're memorizing everything, and why children are so impressionable. So my whole thing is Steiner's work encompasses the super sensible, the common sense, practical, then evolves into a way of thinking that is built on practicality. It's practical for me to believe that there is a spiritual energy to this dimension. It's practical to me believe that there is a material energy because we are in bodies. We are, these have a set of instructions, but the Christ is that balance right in between, and that is what everyone's calling Christ conscious. Well, at the end of the day, Christ conscious is knowing that you need to be in a healthy, able body that's grounded to the earth, that's not filled with GMOs and poisons and herbicides, pesticides, larvicides, all that crap. clean water, spring water. It's practical to get 8 hours of healthy sleep. It's practical to move your body. It's practical to sweat. It's practical to have proper breath. That's your prana, that's your life force. But it's also practical to know that we're not trapped in these bodies and we're not just, dirt beings that just have this experience and go back into the dirt. We are now proven that there is such thing as remote viewing, that there is such thing as psychic abilities, that we know that this all can't be random. That's another big thing with Steiner. The material mechanistic way of thinking was that, we've Big Bang Theory, we've evolved from apes. There is no quantum energy, that there's no energy outside of what we can scale and touch and smell and whatever human bound measurement. We know that's not the case. There's no way that all of this could be from some evolved bacteria strain, and that there is something quantifiably directly related to a creator. And so merging those two worlds is really what Steiner does very, very well. And it's through a clairvoyant activation. It's not through a regurgitation. And I feel not obligated, but I feel it's part of my mission to turn people onto this awareness.
You've definitely turned me on more to it.
Yeah.
I was aware of it already, but I definitely feel the urge to study more of it.
With what you're doing, to have grounding with Steiner's perspective, and again, he's channeling. He's channeling.
He's definitely, you can tell it's a channeling.
Yeah.
But the things I really love is I love the pragmatic sort of like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. There's a masculine quality to it.
Totally.
That's very grounded and actionable.
That's right. He's very actionable. He's super sensible. Again, maybe you shouldn't fake inoculate the queen bee over and over. Maybe that's not a good idea. He said that in his bee lectures from 1917. He did it again in 1923. And he predicted the Great American Bee Collapse to the year 1980. Just think about how crazy that is, right? It's like common sense. Like, the bees are pollinators. They're what create life, not only for human, but for animal, everything, right? It's the ongoing creationism. Cycle, right? It's a cycle, right? Maybe we shouldn't disturb that and let it become fluid and learn how to incubate, just like children. Maybe we shouldn't disturb the growth of children, but we incubate. We allow them to have their experiences and allow them to think for themselves, as opposed to hold them down. It's crazy. The fake queen bee inoculation, like the hive chooses the queen bee. There's a whole frequency to that. And for us humans to get our hands in there and say, no, we're just going to artificially inseminate this and do all this, it's destructive. It's materialism. It's ego. It's all those things. That's why a big part of Steiner's work is the ego and the awareness of the ego. What I've learned from him on ego is that, the whole phrase, it's starve the ego, feed the soul, or whatever. I don't believe in that. I believe we need to have a deep connection to our ego, and that's self-love. You have a mission on this world. I have a mission on this world. He's got a mission on this world. She's got a mission on this world. Everyone has a unique mission. Does that mean that our missions are better or worse? No, but they're different. I have qualities that you have, and you have qualities that I don't have, and vice versa. And that's what makes us unique beings.
Which is the most incredible part of the universe.
That's the beauty
uniqueness that we all have.
This whole system that is trying to create a false uniqueness by hair color and this or whatever the heck it is, that's all false. They're really trying to just create everyone to be one steady organism. And we're seeing that unfold right now. We're in dark times in terms of what's happening on a social landscape. And so I learned from that awareness. I always uniquely knew this. I wasn't programmed to think anything different, to have a healthy relationship with my ego and to love myself. And that creates empowered beings that are here to bring good reckoning in this world. Whereas a scarred ego or a wounded ego, something that's traumatic and you're just building layers of scar tissue around, those are the one that's someone that becomes compulsory and reacts and gets angry and is, the cognitive dissonance is there. You can show them, hey, this is a bottle of Fiji water. Nope, I don't see that. You just can't see it because the scar and the wounding of the ego won't allow you. We're in that. And that's why you have such division in this world. That's why you have this Republican, Democrat bullshit, right wing, left wing, same bird. This whole thing is built on division, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. Steiner knew it. Most philosophers knew that. And we're in it right now.
Oh, we're definitely in it. And I think that I like the way Steiner also characterizes the duality moving into a trinity.
Yes.
And I've written a lot about this from my own perspective on this. And, I think that the world is kind of going through this, what's the word, discombobulation. It definitely is in a state of transition, a state of flux.
Yeah.
Feels like half the world or a big percentage of the world is going to stay in more and more duality. So literally, families will be broken asunder.
Totally.
People that are on Christmas holidays can't talk about anything anymore because it's become offensive to talk about virtually anything
Crazy.
that's an alternative viewpoint. And here we live in a society where everyone's told, it's like, this is how you should be.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it causes society to go to an extreme form of narcissism. But I believe also that narcissism can be the doorway, and it's hard for people to understand this when I say this to them. Narcissism is very often the doorway into higher order consciousness. And what do I mean by that, right? Let me qualify it, right? So what I mean by that is that it becomes so stark that the reality that the narcissist is experiencing becomes such an affront to what they thought they were actually experiencing that they snap into waking up. And I think what's happening is a lot of people that go into like social justice, they're sort of the far end of narcissism. They don't understand it. There's two types of narcissism. There's overt narcissists, and then there are covert narcissists, right? So covert narcissists often become social justice warriors, right? And so they don't realize that all the things that they're judging are just going to be attracted back to them more and more and more.
100%. You hit it right on the nail right there.
And the world isn't a tough place because people hate each other so much. It's a tough place because people hate themselves.
They hate themselves. They want to be in that battle.
And that's what real narcissism is.
Totally,
It's,
completely agree.
it's self-loathing, except for it's placing conditions on yourself that you only want to see the projection you're putting in front of the mirror, not the actual reflection.
That's right.